Welcome to the channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and press the bell icon to stay updated with every new story. A racist police officer assumes that a black man in the park is a criminal and arrests him for no reason. Afterwards, the officer realizes that he has just arrested an FBI agent. Agent Samuel Thompson sat on a weathered bench in Riverside Park, the late afternoon sun casting a warm glow over the greenery. He turned a page in his book, momentarily losing himself in the quiet rustle of leaves. The park was one of his favorite places, a small sanctuary where he could escape the demands of his job. Officer Derek Collins patrolled the area, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. He had walked this beat for over 2 decades. When he noticed Samuel sitting alone on the bench, something in his gut stirred, a feeling he had learned to trust. A black man sitting alone, too calm, too composed, suspicion prickled at his thoughts. "Never seen him around here before?" Derek muttered. He stopped and watched Samuel, trying to place the feeling. There had been reports of a suspect fitting a general description that matched Samuel, vague, flimsy, but enough for Derek. Samuel felt the weight of someone's gaze and looked up. He noticed Derek standing at a distance, staring with a look that was all too familiar. Prejudice masquerading as concern. But Samuel didn't flinch. He closed his book slowly and met Derek's gaze. Derek's grip on his baton tightened. He saw the way Samuel looked at him, steady, unafraid. It unnerved him. "Let's see what this guy's up to," Derek muttered as he walked toward Samuel, his posture stiffening. Samuel watched Derek approach, keeping his expression neutral. He knew what was coming and had seen it many times before. The situation was already loaded, and he knew his response could determine how it played out. "Afternoon," Derek said as he reached the bench, his tone polite but edged with suspicion. "Afternoon," Samuel replied calmly, keeping his hands visible, on the book in his lap. "What brings you out here today?" Derek asked, scanning Samuel's face. "Just enjoying the park. It's a nice day." Derek nodded slowly, though he wasn't really listening. "You from around here?" Samuel smiled slightly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I've been around." The non-answer didn't sit well with Derek. "Mind if I see some ID?" Samuel's smile faded. This was the point where things could go sideways. He knew his rights, knew he wasn't obligated to show ID just for sitting in a public park, but he also knew refusing could escalate the situation quickly. "Am I under arrest?" Samuel asked, his tone measured. Derek bristled at the question. There was that calmness again, that refusal to be intimidated. "You will be if you don't cooperate," Derek shot back, his hand moving to rest on his holster. Samuel took a slow breath. "I'm just sitting in a park. Is there a law against that?" "You fit the description of someone we're looking for," Derek said, though even he knew how weak the excuse sounded. "And what description is that?" Samuel asked quietly. Derek's jaw tightened. He didn't have a good answer. "Don't get smart with me. Show me some ID now." For a moment, the two men locked eyes, tension thickening between them. Samuel decided to comply for now. Without a word, he reached into his pocket slowly and pulled out his wallet. Derek snatched the ID from Samuel's hand and glanced at it. The name didn't mean anything to him, but that didn't matter. "Stand up," Derek ordered. Samuel sighed inwardly but did as he was told, rising slowly from the bench. "Turn around," Derek said, pulling out handcuffs. Samuel felt a surge of frustration but pushed it down. He turned around, letting Derek cuff him without resistance. He could hear people nearby, could feel their eyes on him, but he stayed calm. As Derek tightened the cuffs around Samuel's wrists, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that he was making a mistake. But his pride wouldn't let him stop now. He grabbed Samuel's arm and started leading him toward the patrol car. Samuel didn't say a word as they walked. He wasn't worried about himself. He knew who he was, knew that this officer would find out soon enough. But he couldn't help feeling a deep weariness, the exhaustion of knowing that despite all his accomplishments, he was still seen as just another black man in the eyes of too many people like Officer Derek Collins. The patrol car's engine hummed as Derek drove Samuel toward the precinct. Derek's grip on the steering wheel was tight, his knuckles white. He didn't like the way Samuel had looked at him back there. Calm, unafraid, like he knew something Derek didn't. Samuel sat quietly in the back seat, his hands cuffed behind him. His mind wasn't on the passing scenery, but focused on what would happen next. He knew the system, knew how quickly things could escalate if he wasn't careful. But he also knew his own power, the authority that came with his position, an authority that Officer Collins had no idea about. "What were you really doing in that park?" Derek asked, his voice edged with suspicion. Samuel met Derek's eyes in the mirror. "I told you, I was just reading." Derek scoffed. "A guy like you just sitting around reading? You expect me to believe that?" Samuel raised an eyebrow. "A guy like me?" Derek hesitated, realizing the slip in his words, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. "You don't look like someone who spends his afternoons reading in the park." Samuel didn't respond immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was cool and controlled. "And what does someone like me look like, officer?" Derek didn't answer. He couldn't. Instead, he focused on driving, his frustration mounting as Samuel's calm demeanor continued to unsettle him. Inside the precinct, Derek led Samuel through the main hall, ignoring curious glances from other officers. They reached the booking area, and Derek signaled for Samuel to stand by the processing desk. Officer Jenkins looked up, surprised to see Derek bringing someone in. "What's this about?" "Caught him acting suspicious in the park," Derek replied, handing over Samuel's ID. Jenkins glanced at the ID, then back at Samuel. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but he quickly masked it. "Captain Bennett's in her office. You'll need to take him to her." Derek stiffened. Captain Laura Bennett was known for being tough but fair, a stickler for procedure. "All right," Derek said, his voice tight. They approached Captain Bennett's office. Derek knocked, then opened the door when he heard her voice from inside. "Officer Collins," she said, looking up from her paperwork. "What's this about?" "Caught this guy in the park, Captain. He was acting suspicious. Wouldn't cooperate when I asked for ID." Captain Bennett's gaze shifted to Samuel, and for a split second, there was a flicker of recognition. She quickly masked it, her expression turning professional. "Is that so?" Samuel met her eyes and saw the recognition there. He knew that Captain Bennett was aware of who he was, but she was playing it carefully. "That's right," Derek continued, oblivious to the silent exchange. "I brought him in for questioning." Captain Bennett nodded slowly. "I see. And did you have probable cause to arrest him?" Derek hesitated, feeling the ground beneath him start to shift. "He wouldn't cooperate, Captain." "Officer Collins, why don't you step outside for a moment? I'd like to speak with Mr. Thompson alone." Derek blinked, taken aback by the request, but reluctantly released Samuel and stepped out of the office. As soon as he was gone, Captain Bennett's demeanor shifted slightly. "Mr. Thompson, I apologize for this misunderstanding." Samuel allowed himself a small smile. "No need to apologize, Captain. You're just doing your job. I'm aware of who you are, but I'd appreciate if we kept that under wraps for now. I need to handle this situation carefully." Samuel nodded. "Of course. I'm not here to cause trouble, Captain. I just want to make sure things are handled properly." "They will be. I'll speak with Officer Collins and deal with this appropriately. But I have to ask, why didn't you just tell him who you are?" Samuel's smile faded. "Because it shouldn't matter, Captain. My identity shouldn't be the reason he decides to treat me with respect." Captain Bennett considered his words, then nodded in understanding. "You're right. It shouldn't matter. But unfortunately, it does to some people. The room fell silent for a moment. Finally, Captain Bennett stood up. "I'll call Officer Collins back in. We'll resolve this." As Captain Bennett opened the door, Derek stepped back inside, his expression wary. He glanced at Samuel, who stood calmly waiting. "Mr. Thompson here is not the man you were looking for. You'll release him immediately." Derek blinked, the words taking a moment to sink in. "What?" "But Captain—" "Immediately, Officer Collins," Bennett repeated. Derek hesitated, then finally reached for the keys to unlock Samuel's handcuffs. His hand shook slightly as he did so, the realization of his mistake beginning to dawn on him. As the cuffs clicked open, Samuel rubbed his wrists, giving Derek a measured look. "Thank you, officer." Derek swallowed hard. "You're free to go," he muttered, stepping back. Samuel nodded and turned to Captain Bennett. "I'll be in touch, Captain. There's still a lot to discuss." Captain Bennett nodded in return. "I look forward to it, Mr. Thompson." With that, Samuel walked out of the office, leaving Derek standing there with a sinking feeling in his gut. Derek Collins sat at his desk in the precinct, the tension in his body refusing to dissipate. He had barely been able to concentrate since Captain Bennett had released Samuel Thompson. The unease gnawed at him, deepened by the fact that he didn't understand what had just happened. Suddenly, footsteps approaching his desk snapped him out of his reverie. He looked up to see Captain Bennett walking toward him, her expression serious. "Officer Collins, my office." "Now," Captain Bennett said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Derek followed her to the office, each step feeling heavier than the last. Once inside, Captain Bennett closed the door and gestured for him to sit. "Officer Collins, do you have any idea who Samuel Thompson is?" Bennett asked, her tone measured but stern. Derek shook his head, his confusion deepening. "No, Captain. Just some guy in the park." Captain Bennett leaned forward. "Samuel Thompson isn't just some guy in the park. He's a special agent. One of the FBI's top agents, in fact." The words hit Derek like a physical blow. His eyes widened in shock. "An FBI agent?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's right. And more than that, he's highly respected within the Bureau. His arrest is going to have serious consequences, not just for you, but for this entire precinct." Derek's mind raced, trying to piece together what this meant. He had profiled and arrested an innocent man, a federal agent no less, based on nothing more than his own biased assumptions. "I didn't know, Captain," Derek said, his voice shaky. "I didn't know who he was." "That's the problem, Collins. It shouldn't have mattered who he was. Your actions were based on assumptions and prejudices, not on any real evidence. You can't arrest someone just because they don't look like they belong in a park." Derek wanted to argue, to defend himself, but the words wouldn't come. Deep down, he knew Captain Bennett was right. "What happens now?" Derek asked, his voice low. Captain Bennett sighed. "For now, you're being placed on temporary leave while we investigate this incident. There will be an official review, and depending on the outcome, you could face disciplinary action up to and including termination." Derek's heart sank. Termination. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. "I understand, Captain," Derek finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're dismissed, Officer Collins. I'll notify you when the review is scheduled." Derek stood up, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders, and walked out of the office. As he left the precinct, the familiar sights and sounds that had once brought him comfort now felt distant, almost alien. Derek Collins stood in the corridor outside the conference room, his heart pounding. The official review was about to begin, and every word he said in the next hour could determine the future of his career. The door opened, and Captain Bennett appeared. "We're ready for you, Officer Collins." Inside, The long table was lined with stern-faced officials, representatives from internal affairs, high-ranking officers, and at the far end, Samuel Thompson. Samuel's presence was like a punch to the gut. Captain Bennett took her seat. "Officer Collins, this review is to determine the appropriateness of your actions during the arrest of Mr. Samuel Thompson. Do you understand the gravity of this situation?" "Yes, Captain," Derek replied, his voice low but steady. "Let's start with the incident report. According to your statement, you arrested Mr. Thompson because you believed he was a suspect in a recent series of robberies. Is that correct?" Derek nodded. "Yes, Captain. I saw him in the park and he matched the description. Tall black male, early 40s. He was acting suspiciously." "And what exactly was suspicious about his behavior?" Derek hesitated. "He was alone, just sitting there. When I asked for his ID, he was evasive." "Evasive how?" "He didn't want to show me his ID right away. He seemed like he was hiding something." Samuel's voice cut through the air, calm but firm. "I was reading a book, Officer Collins. Not exactly the behavior of a criminal on the run." Derek flinched but kept his focus on Bennett. "And did you find anything on Mr. Thompson that would indicate he was involved in any criminal activity?" Bennett asked. Derek shook his head. "No, he was clean." There was a heavy silence. Then one of the internal affairs officers spoke up. "Officer Collins, did it ever occur to you that Mr. Thompson might have been telling the truth?" Derek hesitated. "I was following protocol. We're trained to be cautious." "But did you consider that your assumptions might have been influenced by factors other than protocol?" the officer asked pointedly. Derek's throat tightened. "I didn't mean to profile him. I was just doing my job." Samuel leaned forward. "Your job is to protect and serve, Officer Collins, not to judge people based on their appearance." Captain Bennett cleared her throat. "Officer Collins, this review isn't just about what happened that day. It's about the mindset that led to your actions. We need to ensure that every officer in this precinct is upholding the values of fairness and justice." Derek felt a sinking feeling in his gut. "I understand, Captain. I didn't mean to. I didn't want to." He stopped, the words choking in his throat. "We all make mistakes, Collins," Bennett said, her tone softening slightly. "But it's how we deal with those mistakes that define us." Marcus stood up, commanding the attention of the room. "I understand that being a police officer is a difficult job. You're under constant pressure, and sometimes that pressure can lead to bad decisions. But we can't allow those bad decisions to go unchecked. This isn't just about holding Officer Collins accountable. It's about ensuring that something like this doesn't happen again." Derek listened, his heart heavy. He knew Samuel was right, but the truth was hard to swallow. "I'm not here to ruin anyone's career," Samuel continued. "But I am here to make sure that the next time an officer encounters someone like me, they think twice before making assumptions. This is an opportunity for change." Captain Bennett nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson." She looked at Derek. "Officer Collins, you'll remain on temporary leave while we continue this review. I suggest you take this time to reflect on what's been said here today." Derek nodded numbly. "Yes, Captain." The meeting was adjourned, and as the officials filed out, Derek remained seated, his mind racing. He had come hoping to defend himself, but now all he could think about was how wrong he had been. Captain Laura Bennett sat in her office, the final report of the investigation lying closed on her desk. The conclusion was clear, and the decision had been made. A soft knock signaled Samuel's arrival. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Thompson," Bennett began as Samuel took a seat. "After reviewing all the evidence, the witness statements, body cam footage, and interviews, it's been decided that Officer Collins will be terminated from his position." Samuel nodded slowly. "I appreciate the thoroughness of the investigation, Captain. But do you believe this decision will lead to real change within the department?" Bennett paused. "I believe it's a step in the right direction. Collins's actions were unacceptable, and his termination sends a clear message that racial profiling and abuse of power will not be tolerated. But I also know that firing one officer isn't enough. You're right, Samuel replied. This is about more than one officer. It's about the culture within the department, the training officers receive, and the biases that can influence their decisions. If we don't address those underlying factors, incidents like this will keep happening. Bennett nodded. I agree. We're already working on revising our training programs to include more comprehensive education on racial bias and de-escalation techniques. We're also implementing more rigorous oversight and accountability measures. That's a good start, but it's going to take more than just policy changes. It's about changing the mindset of the officers, helping them understand the impact their actions have on the communities they serve. That's not something that can be achieved overnight. I know. It's going to be a long and difficult process, but it's necessary if we want to rebuild trust and ensure that what happened to you doesn't happen to someone else. Samuel leaned back thoughtfully. I've been in law enforcement long enough to know that change doesn't come easy, especially when it involves confronting uncomfortable truths. But I'm willing to work with you, Captain, to help make those changes. This isn't just about me. It's about creating a safer, more just system for everyone. Bennett felt a surge of respect for Samuel. I appreciate that, Mr. Thompson. Your experience and insight will be invaluable as we move forward. Your voice will be heard. Thank you, Captain. I'm not looking for any special treatment. I just want to make sure that this department becomes the best version of itself. That's what the community deserves, and that's what the officers deserve too. As Samuel stood to leave, Bennett rose as well, extending her hand. Thank you again, Mr. Thompson. I look forward to working with you. Samuel shook her hand firmly. Likewise, Captain. Let's make sure this is a turning point, not just a momentary reaction. With that, Samuel left the office, leaving Bennett alone with her thoughts. The decision had been made, but now it was up to her and the department to ensure that it led to real and lasting change. The road ahead would be difficult, but Bennett was ready. The morning was overcast as Samuel Thompson walked up the steps of the precinct. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, but charged with anticipation. The changes Captain Bennett had promised were starting to take shape. Samuel noticed the subtle shifts. U-Bulletin board displayed information about upcoming workshops on racial bias and de-escalation techniques. Officers moved with a different energy, their conversations quieter, more serious. When he reached Bennett's office, he found the door slightly ajar. "Come in," Bennett called, rising from her chair with a warm smile. "Good to see you again, Mr. Thompson." "Likewise, Captain. I wanted to see how things were progressing." Bennett nodded. "We're making headway. The new training programs are being rolled out, and we're implementing stricter oversight to ensure accountability. It's a start, but there's still a lot of work to be done. Change takes time, but it's encouraging to see the steps you're taking. How's the department handling it?" "There's been some pushback. Not everyone is on board, but most officers understand that these changes are necessary. We've had a few difficult conversations, but I'm hopeful we're moving in the right direction." Samuel leaned forward. "That's good to hear. It's important to keep the momentum going, to make sure these changes are more than just a response to one incident." "Agreed. This is about building a new foundation for how we operate, one rooted in fairness and respect for everyone we serve." The door opened, and Derek Collins stepped inside, dressed in plain clothes, a cardboard box in his hands. It was clear he was here to collect the last of his belongings. "Captain," Derek greeted Bennett stiffly, avoiding eye contact with Samuel. "Derek," Bennett replied neutrally. For a moment, the room was silent, thick with unresolved tension. Derek finally turned to Samuel. "Mr. Thompson, I just wanted to say, I didn't mean for things to turn out like this." Samuel met his gaze calmly. "It's not about what you meant, Officer Collins. It's about what you did and the impact it had. Intentions don't excuse actions. Derek flinched but nodded, accepting the truth. I know, I don't know how to fix this. You can start by acknowledging the problem. We all have biases, but it's how we deal with them that matters. You have the opportunity to learn from this, to become a better person because of it. Derek's shoulders slumped. He turned back to Bennett. I suppose this is it then. Bennett nodded, her expression softening. It doesn't have to be the end, Derek. You can still choose to grow from this, to make changes in your life. But that's up to you. Derek stood there for a moment, considering her words, before giving a brief nod. I'll think about it. He paused, then added, Good luck, Captain, and to you as well, Mr. Thompson. With that, Derek turned and left the office, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Do you think he'll be okay? Samuel asked after a moment. Bennett sighed. I hope so. But it's out of our hands now. All we can do is focus on the work in front of us. Samuel nodded. And there's plenty of that. They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of their conversation hanging in the air. Finally, Samuel stood, extending his hand to Bennett. Thank you for everything, Captain. I appreciate your commitment to making things right. Bennett shook his hand firmly. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Your involvement has been invaluable. We're in this together. With that, Samuel turned and left the office, making his way through the precinct one last time. As he walked down the halls, he could feel the eyes of the officers on him, some curious, some contemplative. He knew that change wouldn't come easily, but he also knew that it was necessary. As Samuel stepped out into the cool morning air, he took a deep breath, feeling a sense of resolve settle over him. The path ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to continue the fight for justice. This was just the beginning, and he was determined to see it through. With renewed determination, Samuel walked away from the precinct, his mind already turning to the next steps in his work. There was so much more to be done, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope.